Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier lives. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you. Hello, welcome to another edition of Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. We have a great guest today that you're going to love hearing from. His name is Kevin Gorey. And as a young man, I don't know how old you were, but as a very young man, he had triple bypass heart surgery. And they could only get the bypass done with two of the arteries. The other one was so horrifically clogged, he actually went home from the hospital with one of his arteries still clogged to the gills. So I want you to hear what happened that he led up to that in the first place, and then what has he done to be super healthy today? Because he has done tremendous lifestyle changes that gives him a whole life worth living. And he just shared with me, I talked to him about the fact that he has a darling baby because I did his podcast. Well, he just shared with me that they are pregnant and going to have another child in March. So he has a lot to live for. So you do too if you have any kind of heart problems. So this podcast is for you. So welcome, Kevin, to Tell Me Your Story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your life and how you ended up in the hospital with triple bypass surgery?
Well, thank you so much for having me. That was an amazing introduction. I really appreciate that. The story of how we got there basically probably starts all the way back. I have a family. My father died when he was 55. He had heart disease. He had a heart attack, cirrhosis of the liver. His father was 49. So it's sort of been littered through my upbringing. But I was 40 when this happened. So I was for about the 10 years prior in the food and beverage industry. So working like a lot of late nights, dealing with a lot of stress, things like that, not eating well. I had sort of that, hamburger on Monday night, pizza on Wednesday night, Chinese food Friday night, sort of dinner.
Yeah, that was my diet before I got sick.
Yeah, cooked a few times at home, wasn't really a fast food eater, but was like fried food, and I loved, my slow cooked pulled pork stuff, things like that. And I also, two other things that were a big issue. I really, really loved cigars, or I thought I did. That was my sort of way I relaxed at the end of the night. I would, leave the restaurant or the hotel I was managing and take a long walk, have like a cigar walk, which turned out was not really a stress reliever. And I drank too much wine. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I liked craft beers, but I really started to get into wine once I started getting into the hotel world and managing the restaurants and running weddings and stuff and doing all those tastings. I really got too much of a flavor for that kind of lifestyle. And the last piece of the puzzle, I truly believe, was my inability to deal with stress in a constructive way. I rarely exercised. I would hike every once in a while when my wife made me to, but having an outlet for that kind of stress was really a major cause of this. And it all came to a head on January 11th of 2017 was when the first heart attack happened. I was at a meeting at the hotel that I was working at. When I just got really warm and went to throw some water on my face in the bathroom, and that's where the first one happened. And it was a experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it was like kind of describe it as like a lightning bolt from there was two of them, one in my head and one in my feet, and they sort of met in the middle, in my sort of torso. And I didn't know it was a heart attack. It ended up, I probably waited about 6 hours to go to the hospital. My wife ended up driving me to this little tiny hospital in Northwest Connecticut, who wasn't really prepared for what I had brought to them. So they took some tests and gave me some blood thinners and painkillers and sent me off to Vassar Brothers, which is a bigger hospital in a city called Poughkeepsie, which is upstate New York, by like an hour and a half or 2 hours from Manhattan. And that was, I had another few issues there. I met the surgeon the following day, and that's when they did the cath that you mentioned in your opening, when I thought I was going to have like a stent or something, and I was going to be told to, drink less and quit the cigars and go home. And in fact, I think I had told the doctor who was doing the cath that right before it happened. And he said something like, well, if it's all the same, doctor, let's do it anyway, just to see, like giving me a hard time right back to him, which I thought was awesome. And he showed me the screen and said, well, I want you to look at the monitors. And he showed me one, and he said, that's your right coronary artery. It's 100% blocked. And this is your circumflex artery. That's 90%. And then he's like, I really want you to look at this one. That's your left anterior descending artery, which is completely blocked. And he said, that's what we call the widowmaker. And he goes, you think you're going to go home with a stent tonight? And I'm like, I guess not. So I talked to my wife, and I met my heart surgeon. And my heart surgeon told me flat out when he met me, he goes, I usually talk to people like you in the morgue. I don't usually get to have conversations with people with what you have. So the fact that you're sitting here is a miracle. So we're going to figure out what to do next, which was open heart surgery. They gave me all the options. We were having open heart surgery. We just wanted to wait till the blood thinners had ran their course and that kind of stuff. But my body did not want to wait. The next day, Friday the 13th, we had another infarction, a major one. And instead of waiting till Monday for the surgery, we kind of rushed into somewhat emergency surgery. We took a final few tests, ran, and they were kind of pushing me down the hallways and saying goodbye to everybody. And Friday afternoon, Friday the 13th, like I always say, we went into the operating room, and about 7-8 hours of surgery where they were able to bypass 2, like you had mentioned, but the right coronary artery was just so, he described it as just kind of like thin and clot. There was almost nothing, he said, to bypass. It just kind of, I almost think it was sort of atrophied to the point where you couldn't bypass it. And after talking to him, he said he had mentioned, my surgeon, who was this amazing guy, talked about all this other scarring that he saw on my heart. So he was convinced that I had heart attacks, small heart attacks issues for years, and that heart disease had started with me. He said it probably about 10, 12 years old, just because
oh my God.
Because not just because of the scarring that indicated some heart stuff and some loss of the heart muscle, but the collaterals, which I knew nothing about at the time, which are these veins sort of on the back and sides of your heart that we all have, and that they grow around your heart as we get older to help out your arteries and provide sources of flow, blood flow to the heart and different things. That my collaterals were of someone that far older than me, meaning they had been working to help me for a lot longer. So like I had the collaterals of a 60-year-old at 40. So, my math skills are, so these issues I was having for a long time. So that was it. And then I woke up that following middle of the night that night, by myself in the hospital room, in the hospital room, stuff, the tubes in me and everything, and just sort of going, I'm alive. Like I remember thinking either heaven or hell looks like the ICU at Vassar Brothers, or I'm still alive. One or the other. And it turned out that I was still alive. And then it became what to do next.
Fantastic. Had to be scared. You had to be terrified.
It was terrifying. The second heart attack that occurred in the hospital when I was that next 24 hours after the first one, that was the real terrifying time. That was they were giving me nitroglycerin and morphine constantly. Like it felt, I mean, it's always a little hazy now, to tell these stories, but my mother was there, my wife was there, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my brother drove up from Pennsylvania the minute he found out. So there's a lot of people there that fill in the gaps of my memory, but it was a nitroglycerin morphine cocktail that was doing nothing. I was in so much pain. It felt like my chest and my back were sort of trying to meet each other. And every like 30 seconds, it would just happen and over again. And I told my wife at one point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. There's no way. Because in my mind, I'm thinking I have to wait till Monday to do this. And it's Thursday. There's no way this is possible. And then I think I might have skipped that part before the surgery. They ended up that Thursday putting a balloon in me. They brought me down and did an angioplasty, which is a big deal for a lot of people. But this was like, we just need to put this in you to get you to the surgery because you're not going to make it. Because at that point we were still waiting till Monday. So they put that balloon in, and that made things a little better, feeling a little better. And then Friday came, and I had another incident. So that's when they rushed me in, and they actually kept the balloon in after the surgery. They never took it out. So as a lot of people do when they have a heart attack or heart surgery, they can kind of sit up within 24 hours and maybe walk, not do, jumping jacks. But with me, the balloon was in me for 60 hours. So I had to lay on my back because being rupturing it or an issue with that. So the first 3 days was really hard to even help in my own recovery. I was sort of just kind of laid out. And so yeah, my wife says that when the balloon was put in me, that's when she thought things were going to be okay. I wasn't so sure about that. That was a real terrifying day. The Friday wasn't so terrifying because I thought we had till Monday. I thought I had till Monday to be terrified. So when we were in there and they were doing the ultrasounds of my arteries, so they, when they were going in, they would know where to go. A nurse had just came around, and I learned that after it was because my heart function was dropping, like the ejection fraction, which is what is referred to as the rate at the way your heart is pumping blood out to all your essential organs and everything. It's like 60 in a normal person, this percentage. And mine, when we got in there, was 50. And then it was dropping until it was in like the 30s at this point. So things were not looking good on their test. So this nurse came around and said, we're going right in. Dr. Shahani wants to go right now. So the terrifying like lead up to like saying goodbye and all these, I was like, wait a minute. I thought I had 3 days till Monday to do this. And the guy comes in and the anesthesiologist comes in and says, it's funny because two of the doctors out of the team were named Kevin, came in and said, I'm Kevin, I'm the anesthesiologist. And when he asked me my height and weight and all stuff, and I was like, all right, this is a weird time to get to know you, but do I ask you questions too, sir? And it was like, I was still being my jokey, sarcastic self up until that point. I've since gotten better with that, but And then this guy came in and said, I'm your perfusionist. And I was like, that sounds totally made up. It doesn't even sound like a real job. And he said, oh, it's a very real job. And what I do is I'm in charge of the machine that keeps you alive. When we stop your heart, I take over and I make sure the blood and oxygen gets. And I looked at him and I said, you're going to do what? And he said, we're going to stop your heart. And I said, why on earth would you do that? And he goes, you didn't read the book that we gave you? And I said, and they had given me this book with this little cartoon heart on it. And it said, it was like what to expect when you're expecting heart surgery. And I said, no, I didn't read that book. I thought I had till Monday to read that book. And he said, well, we're going to stop your heart. And when we do, I take over and make sure you survive the surgery and then, I realized this later and I remember after the surgery trying to find everybody and apologizing about giving them such a hard time leading up to this and thanking them all for saving my life. But it was terrifying. And I got to the front doors of the surgery room and everyone kind of stopped sort of in slow motion. And one of my oldest friend in the world, actually from like first grade, had heard what I was going through, and he was running through the hospital trying to find us. And he just burst out of the side doors right before we were going in to the surgery. And I remember looking at him and him telling me I was going to be okay. And that was the last thing I saw of the outside world. Then I was in the surgery and doctor told me I was going to go to sleep, and I went to sleep, and they took over and they did what they could. They fixed what they could and left the rest where it was.
One of the things I love about your story is that you had so much family and love around you while you were in the hospital, and that I'm sure was also a big part of your recovery.
That is true. They told me afterwards that not just that it was Friday the 13th, the surgery, we had 13 people in the waiting room, which I thought was a little ironic. But my surgeon.
It's now your lucky number.
It is. It's turned into my lucky number. You are 100% right. But the surgeon, I still remember him, my wonderful, hard as hell surgeon. He said to me the next day that he goes, if something ever happens to me like it did to you, I wish I could fill a room like you did. He's like, because you had all these people, and it was his way of saying, don't screw this up, because you've got a lot of people here that were supporting you and were staying here and slept here and all night. And yeah, and and then the people who weren't there, with people keeping up to date on the phones and that kind of stuff. So that was amazing. And I wanted to, hug each and every one of them when I woke up the next day. Of course, I wasn't permitted to do that, but it was heartwarming. Yeah.
And
it really
just
was.
to comment on your family history, you probably know this, but when I speak, a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, I got bad genetics, so it doesn't matter what I do. And they now believe that the reason that disease runs in family is because eating habits run in families. That you do get a certain script of what's in your genetics that you could get. But you have the ability to turn that switch on or turn that switch off. This is relatively new thinking. Yeah. And yes, disease does run in families because the way we eat runs in families. So
I agree with you 100%. And I don't use that I don't say that to make an excuse for it, certainly. And I sort of use it to frame the way I was living too. And I say, because people ask me that all the time, and they say, does it run in your family? And from what I know and from what I've learned, and when I'm honest with myself, my answer is, I have a family history of making bad decisions. And that's far more of a reason why this happened to me than the genes. I don't have any birth defects or anything like that came that way. So
and you're not alone. The American Standard Diet that we're all eating is why we're 37th in the world in health.
Right.
We all have bad habits that we've learned in our families, and they're continuing.
Right. It's that learned behavior where, when I was a kid, when the adults, especially the men, were done on eating Sunday dinner, they lit up a cigarette, like right at the table. And then, I talk about this all the time, and I love my father and my uncles and stuff, and they were awesome in so many ways. So that goes both ways. When you see them, you know, always with a Heineken in their hand or always with a cigarette, then you start to think, well, that's okay. These are my heroes, like that live like this. So it can't be that bad. You know, it's good for them. And these are the men I look up to and raised me and taught me how to. I mean, they did amazing things. They taught me how to um, treat other people with kindness and how to take care and how to treat women, whether it's your mother or your wife, good, and your all those kind of things, and how to show up for work. They did have like a lot of good things, but then there's that behavior that ate away at their
We
bodies.
didn't, I don't think we all understand that those things are impacting our bodies in very negative ways. And so we haven't connected the dots as a society that that's not a good way to live.
Yeah,
And
not
I'm,
at the
go ahead.
not at the magnitude that it does. I think you're right. I think people are like, oh yeah, well, smoking's bad or drinking soda is bad, but they don't realize just how bad, like, and how destructive.
And I don't
Even in,
think we change until we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I didn't.
yeah,
Had I not had horrific pain and decided I was not going to put up with that and just take pills for it, I wouldn't have changed.
right,
And I was eating the same diet you were.
right,
I was into the convenience of food. And I would be boom, 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 boom all day. And I would come home and just as quickly I was stuffing my mouth with food. As fast as I could get it in my mouth was how fast it was going in. Wasn't the quality of the food, it was just getting something into me so that I wasn't
right.
hungry anymore.
Yeah,
And those are all really terrible habits.
yeah.
So, okay, so now we know that
There.
we weren't living the life that we were supposed to live, but you did not let your story end there.
Right,
So
and but
we're,
yeah, and like you said, it was the standard American diet. You're right, just like what you said. That's what I was living. So I'm probably very much like most of, whether it's the people listening or the people who read your books, and I'm not that it's not that far off. You know, I mean, it was you work too much, don't sleep that well. You know, the convenience sort of thing. So yeah, I was standard American.
and I actually thought stress was good for me.
Yeah, right,
People were telling me I had to do something about my stress because my personality started getting a little wonky and I was getting a little bit more picky because my stress was so bad. And I thought it was helping my productivity. Little did I know that that tiger almost caught and ate me.
wow,
That's
yeah.
an old paleo mechanism, stress is. And my cortisol was so low, I was almost to Addison's disease.
Oh my
So I
goodness,
finally had to deal with my stress because that alone was going to kill me.
wow,
And yes, stress definitely brings on heart
yeah,
disease. And it brings on something called leaky gut, which is,
yeah,
I'm convinced, the core cause of heart disease, cancer, and autoimmune
right.
diseases. So stress is a biggie,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
learning how to deal with it is a biggie.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we know we got to
Yep.
do something. What did you do?
Well, as my wife likes to say, I've always had a sort of 0 or 100 sort of personality, and so I don't think it surprised her too much that I quit a lot of these things cold turkey, which that just served me better. I mean, I've never had a drink since we left the hospital. I never had another cigar since we left the hospital, although that's the one I probably miss more. Um, and then so that was the first two. It was just pretty much right, kind of so like not drying out, but just sort of cleaning up while I was in the ICU, those 10 days in the hospital. So when I got out of there, I never went back, not even close to any of those two things. And then about 2 weeks after we were home, my wife had asked me what I wanted for dinner that night, and I told her I think we should defrost the salmon because I'm going to be a vegan starting tomorrow. And she looked at me and said, I don't think that's how it works usually. And I said, I don't know how anything works anymore. So I'm going to go with what is considered sort of the end, like the drastic end of the spectrum. And then I'll work my way back if I have to, and I'll see how it goes. But I'm going to do, do, do this, see what happens, and then fill in things as they go, whether it was, if I adding something back to the diet
You
or whatever.
certainly were taking it seriously.
Yeah, I mean that was February. cardiac rehab is something that they prescribe to most people who went through it, but you have to wait like 5 weeks. So mine was starting at the end of February. So that was around while like the diet shifts were happening too. So a lot of things were happening at once, which is a lot to handle. But I felt like at 40 years old and where I was, I mean, my surgeon and my cardiologist they've used the word aggressive when they talk about my heart disease. So they don't just say, I mean, they didn't recommend the vegan thing. Yeah, that was all my own. But when I talked to them about my situation, they're like, yeah, this is a serious thing. Any heart issue is serious, but this is a case that they, they like to say, like they tell their colleagues about, like, you got to see this guy. I mean, this guy was really messed up at 40. He had this kind of, this advancement and this kind of, the heart function and heart, or lack of function, I guess you could say.
And most doctors get a half a day or less in medical school about nutrition. That
Yeah,
would
right.
surprise me. So, although a heart doctor is probably more likely to make recommendations for diet than most doctors, it's not
Yeah,
because he learned any of it in school. It's
right.
because he's learned that sort of has helped his patients down the line.
Yeah, my cardiologist and I have a few doctors who I went to that I've known through childhood, and talking to them, they get most of their diet or nutrition advice from patients. So the stuff that they're recommending to patients are stuff that as other patients they've shown up, and one specific doctor told me a patient came in when their labs and their blood work was so much better. And they said, well, what have you been doing? And they told them, and then the doctor starts, wow, eating more plants and eating, obviously, not drinking or smoking and stuff. But when I was right before we got out, and I got my wife gave me my phone, and I can start doing some research about what to eat and that kind of stuff. It became more and more evident that there was so many. I was like poisoning myself with some of
Right.
the stuff I was eating. So that's why and to me, I know people have different feelings when it comes to vegan and all these kind of different terms and stuff. To me, I knew very little about that lifestyle. So to me, it was just sort of, I'm going to eliminate a lot of stuff, and then I'm going to figure out what I can eat and what I like out of this. It wasn't sort of a big statement I was making. It was,
Right.
I've got to do something for my body, because I've been giving it a real hard time for a lot of years now. So we need to work
I did
together.
vegan at one point. I am diabetic and I did not feel good only
Right.
eating
Yeah.
plants. So I eat very clean meat. I eat meat that eats his
Nice.
natural diet. But I call myself a pagan, which
Nice.
means I'm halfway between paleo and vegan because I don't need huge amounts of meat.
Right.
I just need enough meat that lets loose its sugar over a long period of time that keeps my blood sugar even.
Okay.
So I never eat more than the size of the palm
Yeah.
of my hand. You don't
Right.
need that great big steak you get in
No.
New York City when you go
No.
out to dinner.
No one
It's
does.
That's not good for you.
No.
But to have a little bit of protein is
Yeah.
and I don't care when I work with a client if they want to eat paleo, pagan, or vegan, as
Right.
long as 75% of what they're eating is vegetable
Right.
or
Yeah.
fruit,
There you go.
real food,
Yeah.
real plant food.
Right. Yeah. Stuff. I mean, I have, um, my wife works for a rice company. So organic whole grains, um, organic oats. I mean, those were the staples, like that started right off. That were the easiest to adapt. And then I had my experimental cooking of tofu and tempeh and some different things. Some field roast, I think I remember having, which was a experiment. It was pretty gross. So yeah, I've gone
And tell
back and
people
forth.
who your wife works for because it's the only rice that I will eat.
Yeah, it's Lundberg Family Farms. They're in Northern California, and they have quinoa also. So it's thousands and thousands of acres of brown rice and white rice, and they all their products. You've seen them. The package. They're known for the packaged rice and the rice cakes.
And theirs is the cleanest rice that's on the market. And I understand that California rice has way less arsenic in it than rice from other areas in the country. So
Yeah,
that's another good reason to buy the rice that your wife
yeah.
sells.
They've been a godsend. So that's a staple in our house, and except the pretty much the oats and the rice and the fruits and vegetables, and yeah, and I just mix it in from there. I still cook. I cook all the meals, so that
Now,
helps.
you were not cooking before you got sick, I'm assuming.
I would cook like on my day off,
Okay.
but yeah, I would always eat at work. You're always in either a bar or a restaurant or running a wedding or some kind of event that always had that kind of stuff. So I was always eating outside of breakfast, which I was usually skipping, to be honest with you. I was one of those just have coffee for breakfast. So that was also not a good thing. But yeah, I would cook like once a week on my day off, and now I cook 3 meals a day for us every day. And where just like I won't go through the whole examples, but with me, my wife still eats fish, so I make her fish dinner. And what I do is I'll take nori, which is like what people have sushi,
Hmm.
and I wrap that around tofu, and then I cook it the same way as I cook her fish. So there's this kind of like sea sea feeling to what I'm eating too, and I get my protein and that kind of stuff. So I've done little kind of swaps and stuff, but it's been now 3 years and 8 months, and I haven't gone back. So it's served me fairly well. I mean, I went that first year was really rough. That was I ended up leaving that hotel that I was at. I just wasn't. I kind of got pressured into coming back too early, and it was just not a healthy situation. So I left there, and it's been difficult to kind of use my skills in that industry and then leave that drinking, smoking, up all night kind of atmosphere. So it's a tough industry to do that in, to live cleanly in. So I got out of it. I recognize that. So I got out, and yeah, and then the diet started snowballing. That nutrition, I started to feel better, and I started to do the 20-minute walks, and then the hour walks, and then the hikes. I remember we would go on hikes where I would walk past like landmarks that I would remember, and I would tell myself like, this is as far as I used to be able to go, the old me. And now I hadn't even broke. Like I was right. I just was warming up. And then it turned in the year after 2018 in April, I saw a trail race. I had gotten to hiking and trail running, and I signed up for a 25K trail race that was going to happen in June. And everybody thought I was completely insane. All my friends, and because I wasn't a runner at all even to begin with before this. But I trained for it, and I did everything right, and I did my trail race, and it took me a really long time, but I finished it. And so then I added the exercise on top of that. Like the nutrition kind of came first, then the exercise came second, and then the stress more management came third. So I've been sort of stacking them as they went. So
And that's okay because you were making progress all the way along. You cannot do it all at once.
right, yeah, right. So I still had never taken a yoga class. My wife is she's done a lot of things in her life, but she's a certified yoga teacher. She doesn't teach much anymore because her job with Lundberg is pretty busy. But I had never taken a yoga class or meditation or any of that kind of stuff. And then I took one of her classes, and then I started building on that stress and reading some books and just talking to some people, doing some kind of mindfulness practices and journaling, and like gratitude practices. That has been more of a recent addition to the whole body, sort of whole
Yeah,
mind
I
wellness.
do gratitude every morning. It sets my day off on a positive note.
It's amazing, and I'm not surprised. to hear you say that, especially talking to you for so long now, but and on for my show too, the people that I've met, I don't know how it is with you, but all the people I've met through doing this, every single one of them has a gratitude practice. It's with it's uncanny. Everyone, and it just comes out in the natural form of the conversation, and someone will say, it's 5 minutes every morning when I wake up. I don't even get out of bed and I do it. Or I talk to a guy who's like, I write down 3 things every night. Or another woman who said, we sit down at the table. Like kind of like when you were a kid and at Thanksgiving, you would say what everyone's thankful for, right?
I even did a little journal
Yeah.
that you can write down what your victories were from the day before, because I don't think we give ourselves enough credit
Right.
for our victories, even something as little as I eat vegan now. And then a place to write down what you're grateful for. I did this for my book group because there were
Okay.
women in there who weren't giving themselves credit for anything they were accomplishing, and none of them were practicing gratitude.
Right.
It's such an integral part of my life that I can't imagine not doing that.
When I'm reflecting now on this, like the 3 years, 3+ years, and the people I've talked to and that I've met, the the gratitude practice is essential. It's one of the most important things, and mine is very recent. So this isn't it's only more of a 3-month practice than a 3-year practice, like the diet and the hiking and everything. Um, and the difference in the 3 months is astronomical,
Yeah,
and
it
not
changes your whole
everything.
attitude.
This your my attitude, and um, it makes everything, you just value everything more, even the mistakes and even the
Oh,
errors.
yeah.
You learn from each one of them because of that. And like what you said, I was horrible at giving myself any credit for anything. I went My cardiologist now, she's this woman, doctor in town. She's awesome, and I've gotten really lucky with doctors who they don't take a lot of my crap, which is good. And I come with questions like you did, um, and after the first couple of times, when I'm coming, you can tell they're ready for me. Instead of, which is, I think, is great. Instead of going like, oh, this guy again. The last few times, like I was at a point where my current cardiologist, where I was going to an appointment, I told my wife, I'm like, if this one doesn't go well, I'm gonna get a new one, because I don't think she's paying attention to what I'm saying. And I went in there, and man, she had her homework down, and we hashed. It was the longest appointment I ever had, and I didn't feel like she was rushed out of the room. She was kind of like,
And the
which,
average appointment is 6 minutes.
oh man, she sat down there and sort of puts her stuff out. I'm like, oh, she's ready. Like this, okay. We're gonna talk about all these different things, and she told me why she didn't. I would ask, why can't I take this test? And she would say, well, oh, I wanted to do this, and she would tell me what we're gonna do. And we laid out this whole plan. Um, yeah, and so that has been
She's
really
a good
big.
doctor.
Yeah, it worked, and I think that's a big thing too, with um, not just being honest, because the doctors, like I said, they don't get the training on nutrition. They have a lot of other training, but we need to not just be our own advocates, but be honest with them and tell them what's going on.
Right.
And
And you need to go ready to have a robust conversation. So
yeah,
do your own research.
right,
Don't be afraid to walk in with questions and pick your doctor's brain,
right,
because you are the only person who knows your body.
right,
Nobody else knows it, not the doctor, not the who said of the greatest magnitude, nobody but you. So
right.
go in there ready to do that. And if your doctor doesn't want to do that, you have the wrong doctor.
Yeah, and you could find someone else. Someone else will. I mean, I talk
Yeah,
to people all the time. I mean, you're people sometimes forget. I know they go to school for so long and they do all these great things, but we're paying them. It's not the other way around. Like, like if you in any other situation in your life and you're paying someone and you're not feeling okay about that relationship, you go and find someone else.
right.
I understand people, if they live in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, their options are limited, but there's a lot more stuff out there now. There's people doing stuff virtually. There's a lot more, like you said, you got to do the research yourself, and we're all
You have
different.
to own your own body.
Yeah, my heart's different than yours and everyone else's. So you have to, yeah, that was, yeah, what you just said. You have to own your own body. You have to take responsibility and really, I just when I started to finally, and it happened in that first day and the first weekend in the hospital, be honest with myself, you know, not do the why me, you know, that was pointless, or
Yeah,
you
that
know,
didn't do anybody any
that
good,
doesn't do
especially you.
right. So that it wasn't. I remember saying to myself in that when I had all those tubes in me going, I'm not going to ask why this happened to me. I'm going to ask, like, how do I get out of here? Like, what do we need to do? Like, what do I need to show you? You know, and then they give me the list of all the things you got to do. And like, well, how do we get the chest tubes out? Like, what do I have to do for that? And they're like, well, your blood pressure's got to be this. And then, you know, there was just the steps of what do I have to do next? And then give yourself credit when you do one of
Yep.
those things, like
Yep.
what you alluded to before,
Because it's
giving,
huge.
yeah, like one of the things at night, you know, I'll write down like what went well today, you know, and kind of celebrate those things. I see people all the time where they like have this, they proclaim to have this, every nothing goes well, and if you really talk to them and you ask them about their day, tons of stuff went well. They're just forgetting that part of it. You know, they're
For some
focusing on the
reason, we
negative.
seem to focus in on the bad. I don't know why that is. But if
Yeah.
you start to focus in on the good, more good starts to come in, which is the beauty of gratitude.
Yeah, there you go. You just wrapped it up perfectly. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. I mean, and there's nothing to say you can't, if something didn't go exactly like you wanted, just learn from it, and then how would you do that different tomorrow? But really celebrating those things that went well. And
And verbalizing to the
yeah,
people who helped you get to that
right.
next level. Because who doesn't want to hear that you're grateful that they helped you?
Yeah,
If we express that more, we'd live in a much nicer, kinder world, because all of our relationships are improved if we express gratitude.
right. Yeah, the communication and building those relationships has been one of the most rewarding things post
Right.
surgery, and realizing all that stuff that I could have missed out on if I didn't make it, you know, through that. And yeah, so you don't, I know people always say like, I'll never take anything for granted ever again, which whatever, but
But we do.
we do all the time.
How quickly we
We
forget.
do. People, you forget all the time. Um, so yeah, it's, I'm hoping people don't have, I try to tell, especially my friends, we talked about it. Like, I'm trying to tell them, don't let me be the example. You don't have to get to this point to then have gratitude and tell your wife or your mother or whoever, you know, thanks for doing this, or the people at work or the guy who makes your sandwiches, you know, like express it to people now. You know, don't wait. It's
Because it's a
pointless.
win-win. It
Yeah,
makes you feel good,
it
it
does.
makes them feel good, and it makes the world a better place. So it costs nothing to do
And
that.
the person you shared that with, then it makes them more likely for them to do it. It sort of builds, and like kind of like the tree just kind of branches out, and then they're kinder and nicer. It's it's really just essential way to live and to get through these sort of chronic conditions that we have,
Mhm.
you know.
I have a question. How long, when you got home, did it take before you started noticing that your body was feeling better? You had already changed how you ate right out the gate. How
Right.
long did it take before you started feeling like your change in diet was improving how your body felt?
It almost, I would say within a few weeks. The diet part was really quick. um it had, like I said, I had gotten a kind of a head start on getting that whatever was in me from the cigars and the wine out of me in the hospital. And then so we were home January 20th. I'd say by March I started at cardiac rehab, and I thought it was going to be a, a very tall order for me to complete that cardiac rehab, because my chest still hurt, and um, I was just still beat up. My, you know, the vein that they harvested from my leg was still all, the leg was still all beaten up, and you know, just my back was really painful. You know, you get your rib cage pried open, it affects everything. So your back's going to hurt. But the diet, I really feel that was a key in not just going to cardiac rehab and doing well and graduating from it, and the nurses being confident that I could exercise on my own. And I feel like the diet that switching to more of that plant-based every day in and out, my body started feeling really great in March.
I ask that because when I speak in my local community, the number one question I'm asked is, why don't I feel deprived that I don't get to eat all that old stuff?
Right.
And I was deprived when I was eating the standard American diet. I am anything but deprived now because I feel great. And I'm still a foodie. I make all my own food just like you do. Doesn't mean I'm not eating yummy food. It just means I'm not eating like everybody else is. And I've had to figure that out.
The amazing part, because I was always a front of the house person, so I wasn't a chef by any means, but I've always been capable in the kitchen. What this different way of eating for me, it's actually broadened. I have there's more variety now. My whole world has been opened up to so many different cuisines and different, I'll get like a cookbook, and every country or every cuisine has a vegetarian or vegan type direction to it. So you can pick out of that. But I mean, I tell people, we go to India one night, we are in Mexico another night. I'm in, Japan making like vegan sushi, and I went, I took an online kind of cooking course, a plant-based cooking course that first winter after the heart attacks, just to sort of relearn the spices and how to do, a little more flavoring with, without the kind of lazy way, which is, the salt,
and
sugar,
spices,
fat.
by the way, are also very healthy for our body. Who knew?
Right. Yeah. And the salt, sugar, fat is sort of kind of the lazy man's version now, I say, of adding flavor. You can do it in so many different ways. You can still sprinkle those in. Obviously, we need all those things, but it's not supposed to overpower the dish. It's sort of, as the complementer, just to bring out a little bit. So that was a good education. But now, I mean, I have no problems finding things to eat. I went to there's only been one time since where we've gone out, because I used the same thing in that world I was in. I loved restaurants. That's why, and I loved hotels and bars, and I could nerd out on the structures and the lighting fixtures and all that kind of stuff. So I still love going out. It's curtailed big time since. I mean, if we went out once a week now, that's a lot. But
do you vet the restaurant before you go? I spend a lot of time vetting where I can eat, because I want to know that they can support me, because I don't want to eat the standard American diet.
Yeah.
And restaurants want to work with you. They want your business.
As someone who managed like as a food and beverage director, and who've managed places, if anyone tells you they don't like that, they're lying, because people in our position loved someone calling ahead and saying, I'm coming with a group of 8 and I'm the only one who is gluten-free. So I want to make sure, or vegan or whatever, or I just can't have salt, whatever it is. I mean, I was running a dining food service for a retreat center where we were doing 2,000 meals a day, 600-700 guests, 3 meals a day. And so that's an operation unlike anything I was at before. And people are booking their retreat, and every diet imaginable come across our radar, things that I never even heard of, and I thought I knew a lot of stuff. And we would have it up on the wall, and you would talk. There was a certain person on each shift who was sort of responsible for that. The restaurants love that, because the worst thing, the thing that restaurants hate more than anything is having a dish sent back. That's so no one wants that. And I talk to cooks all the time. Oh, cool. I've always wanted to try to cook with this spice. That person's coming at 8. Great. I got this great idea. Because these chefs, these are young men and women.
Bored too.
They're young men and women. Yeah. And I've always wanted this to be on the menu and so won't let me. So now I get to try it. Like that's a great piece of advice. Like, yeah, calling ahead and just communicating goes back to that other
Yeah,
conversation.
and
But
I have all my sensitivities on a business card with my picture because when I give it to the waiter, I want him to remember who gave it to him. But I send him to the kitchen and I say, I've already called ahead. Your cooks know I'm coming. This
yep,
is what I have to avoid. Why don't you ask them what they can feed me?
yeah, and you do,
And
and if you're positive too when you do it, I mean that's another
yeah,
thing.
they go, thank God you put it on a card. That's
Yeah,
brilliant. I have restaurants who have my cards on file all over town because they are so appreciative that I'm not going to order something and go, oh, I forgot to tell you this, or oh, I forgot to tell you
yeah,
that.
and if they're not, just go to someplace else. So, you know
Yep.
what I mean? There are tons of places that we would do these big giant weddings, and you have your chicken, your fish, and your vegetable dish, and then somebody would come in and say, I forgot to fill out the thing, and I can't have this, and all I see on your menu is this. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to go in, and if I had to make it myself, I would do it. Like everyone, that's just a different kind of idea of service or whatever. But if they're not willing to do it,
Well, and I
don't
have
give them your
friends who
money.
go, you're going to do what? You're going to be pushy about what? Even
It's
when I went to France and we met friends, they said the French are no more going to work around your idiosyncrasies than the man in the moon. First restaurant we walked into, I handed him my card. He came over, he patted me on the back and he said, Madame, I'm going to make you something fabulous. And I ate better than everybody else.
And right. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. I'll go to some of these places and the stuff that the chef will whip up and bring out, everyone ends up looking at it. But just to finish that thought though, was the reason why 90%, maybe a little more of us that went into that profession is because we like taking care of people. That's what we do. So what you're asking for them is, hey, I'm a little different than your normal customer, but they look at that as, don't worry. Like that guy who just tapped you on the shoulder, he was saying, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. And
Right.
that's why we do that. And if you come across people who don't want to do that, just go to someplace else.
Yeah.
Because there's tons of us. Trust me. I know jaded cooks, plenty of them, but for the most part, we want to take care of people and serve people and give our best foot forward.
And
And
I'm happy that we're talking about it because people are too shy
yeah,
to put out there what they need, and they'd rather be miserable than to speak up, and that is not necessary.
yeah,
I have never had somebody say, ooh, wee. I have had a couple restaurants tell me there was nothing they could feed me. And then I have an emergency pack in my luggage or in my
yeah,
car or whatever so that I can still enjoy the company of the people that I'm with, and I'm hardly going to starve. But
yeah,
it doesn't happen very often.
right.
Generally, they're very
Yeah.
accommodating.
Yeah. It's happened to us once where like, just the stocks and everything that they make, had pork was in everything. Like there was just no way, and it's cool. And I'm like, you know what? Thanks for your time. We'll just go to the sushi place next door. And they're like, cool, sorry about it,
Right.
and then whatever. It's not the end of the world. Yeah, it's really not.
So, okay, I think we are past our time, and I've
Okay.
loved the conversation,
Yeah.
and we're going to play the whole tape, so it's okay that
Cool.
it's too long. But what a great conversation. I think that anybody listening to this will have learned a whole lot about how to take care of themselves. And I have a theory that if you don't want to get heart disease, eat like you have it now. And
Right.
if you don't want to get cancer, eat like you have cancer now. And if you don't want to get autoimmune disease like me, then pay attention to all these conversations, because there is absolutely no reason you have to end up where the two of us did. Don't
Absolutely.
wait until you're there to change. And these conversations should give you hope that if you have ended up where we are, there is a lot of stuff that you can do, because it also only took me, I think, about 4 weeks when I could really feel the shift in my body and started to feel better. So it
Okay.
doesn't take
Right.
forever.
Yeah.
And so it's worth it to change, and know you're not deprived. You will
Right.
be jubilant that your body feels so good, and it's worth it.
Yeah, and it's kind
So,
of like you were saying about the doctors and doing your own research and being your own advocate. There's so many companies out there, the big food companies, all that stuff, they don't care about us. They don't care about
No,
our health. So
they only care about using the cheapest possible ingredients to put in that box or that frozen food. And it's loaded with chemicals that your body doesn't know what they are, because you don't know what they are when you read the label. So if you
yeah,
don't know what it is, don't eat it, because your
there's no
body can't use it.
there's no one in those boardrooms that is going, is this healthy for our
No, they're
customers?
actually making decisions of what's good for their profits.
Right. So and it's such an amazing feeling, because I fell into that trap, but when you're out of it, and then the feeling of taking control back, be like, no, I'm not gonna buy, you know, Coke and Pepsi anymore, or I'm gonna you or eat at McDonald's, and those you guys don't have control over me anymore. And
Right.
then you build, like I said, and then you do the diet, and then you start exercising, and it just builds on one another, and you don't have to be this sick or this tired. You really don't.
No,
It's
no. And as my book says, it feels really good to feel good. And when you get there, you'll do a lot to never go back.
absolutely 100%.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I've had so much fun talking to you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you. This probably isn't going to run for a while, but I'll get you the date so
Great.
that we can both plaster it everywhere and
I
everybody can
will.
hear it.
I'll love it. Yeah,
Okay?
I'm building up my thing too. So the episodes are just starting to come out. So I'll send. Yeah, it's cool. There's a lot of opportunity for us.
And the
The
world
group,
needs us.
the group of us who are doing this.
Right. All of you need to hear this. That's why we're doing it. These are all from our heart to you.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Perfect.